If I may, I'd like to call the Mayor's Leaders Table meeting to order. We recognize we're gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Jessica Vanderbilt, who ditched her ugly sweater to attend this morning, but is being outdone by Jeremy Hall. There's the Christmas
Oh,
spirit.
I like Jeremy's sweater.
Not quite as There's no one joining us electronically this morning, and there's no late items to introduce. Motion for adoption of the agenda is circulated. Moved, Anna, seconded Dave, all those in favor, any opposed, none. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved, Donna, seconded, Bob, took me a second, until I'm in senior's moment. All those in favor?
If I might, just on the minutes, I noticed my, I know it's a small thing, but my title is AVP of External Relations for VIU, not Community Partnerships. We can update that, that would be wonderful.
We certainly will.
Thank you.
We don't, especially if it involves a pay raise as opposed to.
Not sure if that's what happened, but.
Okay. Subject to that amendment, all those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Agenda items, the first is health and housing completion. Lisa Brinkman, good morning.
Good morning. Actually, Kasia Beacon will be presenting this morning.
Morning, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna grab, would you like me to sit here or would you like me, or to stand?
Do whatever you want.
Hey,
This is very informal, even though it's formal.
thanks Natalie.
Those are the rules, but right there.
Like you mean right there? Or here? Okay.
But there's no pay increase.
Great,
Actually,
no more
everyone at this
responsibility.
table except for me is free, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Kasia Beacon, and so I work in community planning with Lisa and now, well, no longer Christy. She's now the manager of social planning. But they are both here today to help me present on this topic because it is such a wide-ranging topic. So we're going to go through the actions the city is taking on health and housing. So this is based on a previous meeting that this group had, requesting some more information from staff on the initiatives that we're taking. So we're doing a lot. So it's going to be a high overview of what we're doing. I'm not going to get into details unless you ask questions. So please stop me at any moment and we can elaborate. But overall, this will be a high-level overview of the initiatives we're taking. Here we go. So the presentation will be organized based on downstream, midstream, and upstream initiatives and programs. This is a more recent approach that I've learned about, so I'm just going to explain to the group. But overall, downstream approaches are actions that address the immediate health and housing needs of the community. Midstream approaches are actions that look at prevention and risk intervention strategies. And then upstream approaches are actions that have a community-wide impact. So from the micro downstream to the macro upstream. So that's the way that the actions will be organized today. So in terms of downstream initiatives, we have the extreme weather response and warming and cooling centers. We have hygiene programs that includes the, remind me again what it is? Shower program.
And washroom.
And the washroom program, thank you. Meal program, surviving in Nanaimo guide, and community safety officers. So that's the downstream actions and programs. In terms of midstream, we have Systems Planning Organization, which supports the implementation of the Health and Housing Action Plan. So the Systems Planning Organization provides research, data, analysis, education, and coordinates to improve the community's response to addressing health and housing challenges in order to help those that are homeless. We also have the Nanaimo Acute Response Table, which used to be known as the Situation Table. That's a relatively new initiative. And that's a proactive hub that brings together people engaged in health, social service, and public safety so that they can respond rapidly and effectively to vulnerable persons or family at high risk situations who need to be connected quickly to services and supports. So it's a round table of individuals in our community that sit together and try to help our homeless population. Next, we have upstream. So this is once again the more macro. We have the Memorandum of Understanding with BC Housing, which I'll get into in the following slides, and what that includes. We have the Rent Bank and Rent Supplement Program. We have the community amenity contribution and development cost charge reductions for non-market housing units. So if you build those, you get a reduction in those fees. Downtown revitalization tax exemption program, the hotel downtown took advantage of that program. The Housing Legacy Reserve Fund, so during a rezoning process, a part of the community amenity contribution, 40%, can go to the Housing Reserve Fund, which then can be used towards building more housing or purchasing land for more housing. Community amenity contribution policy, that's part of that. It is triggered at rezoning stage. Streamlining application processing, so that's currently what Jeremy's group is working on. We received funding, I believe, from the province to help streamline application processes. Affordable housing initiatives, which there are many of, which I'll list in the next slide. And the Nanaimo Youth Resiliency Strategies, so we're doing a lot.
I don't want to, if I ask a question, if I take a slide of this, because I'm doing some work,
Okay.
and this would be helpful rather than wait, because it takes some time to get the slide presentation, or can we get it like right after this presentation? Because it'll affect what I write and what I take. Just a question.
Absolutely, it should be part of your agenda package.
Yeah, it's in your agenda package.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, you know what, I went through it, and I saw you were presenting, but I didn't look at the detail. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, it's all there?
It's all there.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Okay. So in terms of affordable housing initiatives, quite a few. So the increasing housing options, which was presented last time and brought up this topic of wanting to present today, so everyone's aware of that one. That's actually going to council on Monday to provide overview of the results of that initiative. The family-friendly and adaptable housing policy, that's also part of the housing initiatives, which will be presented to council on Monday. Pre-zoning urban centers and corridors for affordable housing. This is a project that was identified as a priority for council, and that is to identify opportunities to potentially pre-zone land in our mostly areas that we want the most density for affordable housing. Both of these three initiatives are somewhat impacted by the new legislation, which I'll get into, but they're still on our work plan right now.
That's a very gentle word, somewhat.
Reviewing increasing the delegation of development permits for affordable housing projects is another opportunity that we have that staff can look at. Creating a tenant relocation policy, so should an existing rental development be replaced with a new one, it's an opportunity to look at how to help find homes for those that are going to be displaced. And exploring land acquisition and partnership opportunities for affordable and supportive housing. So that's an ongoing initiative that we have in the city.
Cassie, can I just ask for a bit of background on two of those points? So
Of course.
what does it mean, review of increasing the delegation of development permits? What's being delegated and how?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
So the city has a delegation bylaw for development permits. And so development permits, I think it's 100 units or less, can be delegated to the Director of Development Services for approval. And also, if there are certain variances that are more minor in nature, that can be delegated to Director of Development Approvals. So there may be an opportunity to review that and see if there's more development permits that could be delegated rather than going to council for approval.
And so at this point, that's a recommendation to council?
To review, no, I think that is council's direction to staff to do that review. So that direction has already occurred, and that's a project that's on the books to be done.
Oh, to be done?
Yes.
So not done yet?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
And is that likely to happen relatively soon, do you think?
Hoping in 2024. It was on the work plan definitely to do in 2024. But with the new provincial legislation, our work plans for 2024 have been impacted, and we're just kind of sorting out right now what's achievable, what we are intending to do, and what will need to get bumped so that we can do the required projects the province is asking us to do through Bill 44 and Bill 47.
And my second one was the last bullet, explore land acquisition and partnership opportunities. What does that mean?
Yeah, so Kasia will get into that a little bit more in the next slide, but We have an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with BC Housing, so we have the one from 2019, which Kasia will speak to, but we're also working towards an addendum so that we continue our Memorandum of Understanding with BC Housing to find more opportunities for the city and the province to work together to build supportive housing, non-market housing, and, but yeah, I'm getting ahead of the presentation.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. I'm glad you raised that, Bob, because I mean, I think it's fair to say this, the city's anxious to try and speed up the permitting process. And, well, it's about business. Somebody buys something, they want to end up with a unit that's producing revenue, and the faster we can make that happen, the better. But having said that, the language I use about the province is that all of these bills are well intentioned, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, I'm afraid. So on one level, it may in the long run help, but in the short term, it does throw us off in terms of figuring out what we can do that meets provincial goals and city goals and isn't contrary to what the province is planning. So it's a bit of a challenge, I'm afraid. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve, and the city has, and as Dale would point out, you know, I mean, we've got hardly a house goes up in Nanaimo anymore. I'm exaggerating only slightly, a single family dwelling without a mortgage helper in it. So it's a bit frustrating for staff and for us as well. Sorry, please carry on.
And so these actions that you see here, they come from the Integrated Action Plan. So that was a document that helps support city plan, and it lists all of the actions that the city could do. And council prioritized over 203 actions within that document, and these are reflections of those priorities that council would like staff to work on related to housing. Okay, so the 2019 MOU with BC Housing, it includes 6 properties around the city. You can see the map here represents some of those. 3 affordable rental buildings with approximately 125 homes for families and individuals. 4 purpose-built permanent supportive housing developments with approximately 190 homes for people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. 1 project complete, 1 is under construction, and 3 are in either the OCP or rezoning process. And 1 rezoning is to be submitted in the spring of 2024. So that's where we're at with that MOU with BC Housing.
And that was the partnership piece that you're...
Exactly.
Is part of that initiative, are other partnerships considered besides BC Housing?
Your worship, I'd say in the past, the city's certainly done other partnerships. I can think of the city's provided land to Habitat for Humanity, for example. The city's provided land to what was at the time called the Nanaimo Aboriginal Center on Bowen Road. So that, yeah, and then just last night actually, I had a public hearing for the Tetuxton project, which is a combination of BC Housing owned land, city land, and school district property. So yeah, a number of initiatives outside of the MOU for sure.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's fair to say if there's innovative folks want to come forward, our mouths are shut and our ears are open.
Well, and I hope my bias isn't showing too much here, but I think BC Housing is somewhat limited in what they can do and certainly the speed at which they can operate. And personally, I believe we all need to figure out how to work with BC Housing, but also in addition to working with BC Housing if you really want to try and make some progress.
I think it's fair to say that you're not the only person to express frustration, and I don't fault them. They've been not necessarily managed, given more work than they could manage with the staff they had, and staffing up is a bit of a problem, and it's particularly upsetting because all of us see the growing demand and the numbers and the needs. And you know, every day somebody, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, virtually every day someone sends me another innovative suggestion about what could be done. But of course, it always involves senior governments, and it's well, that's why we're talking about it today. Dave?
Just a question on the methodology to get to these numbers. I'm running a whole bunch of numbers now, which I'm going to share in January. So I think I've got a pretty good handle on need. So, you know, identify need and work backwards, and I understand the constraints of BC Housing, but, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, you might get into this later in the presentation, but I mean, there's such a shortfall here, right, as we know. And we're talking a dramatic shortfall. And so things just keep getting worse. Just wondering how we, maybe I'll just leave it at that, and as we go through, we can talk about that concern I have about.
So is it a shortfall of just housing in general and non-market housing?
Well, no, non-market housing, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, big time. So, I mean, we know that, but I've run the numbers now. Significant. So, yeah, not to deflect this, but perhaps as we go through, we can think about that.
So there, I actually have had a lot of thought on it because part of the pre-zoning for affordable housing project was looking at models of other jurisdictions
Right.
of how they're building more non-market housing. And the tools that we have available to us right now are density bonusing. We don't have inclusionary zoning, which is a model that many jurisdictions have used, especially in the States, for over 30 years. And that's where a certain percentage of your development, depending on the market, is built towards non-market housing. So 10% of all the units are non-market. The province has recently announced that they are looking at that model for BC, potentially other models as well, because once again, it's based on the market. So that is another component that is separate from BC Housing, where the development community takes on the non-market component that our housing needs report states is needed in our community.
That's a great housing needs study, by the way. Actually, I'm mindful of the time we move through this, but I'd like this group to reflect on, you know, what we see and the need that's out there. Just, we can comment later perhaps on that.
So then there's an addendum to the 2019 MOU, so that includes looking at rapid housing, a navigation center, supportive and affordable housing, some more of that, complex care housing, shelter beds, extreme weather shelter beds, and additional rent supplements. So that's in talks with BC Housing right now. So just a high-level overview for now. We also advocate. So for example, at the 2023 VCM that happened in September, there's quite a bit of advocating that went on. These are examples of some of the handouts that we gave to the Premier and ministers. So we were everything from housing to the navigation center to the rent supplements we were advocating for. We had specific requests to ministers that include everything from policing resources to encampments on provincial property. So I won't go into details, but it gives you a sense of what we're advocating for. Ministry of Health, looking at complex care facility needs, detox recovery spaces, and overdose prevention site services. It also included advocating to Island Health for mental health and addictions, complex care, overdose prevention site services, as well as the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital needs to expand. Minister of Health, very similar, but just sort of an example of what we're advocating for. So that's the advocacy piece. Now I move on to the new provincial legislation. So we have 4 new bills for consideration. One is regarding short-term rental accommodations. The next one is small-scale multi-unit housing. So that relates to the increasing housing options that was presented to you a while back. It's very within that wheelhouse of what's being proposed. Bill 46 is development financing, which I'll get into, and then last is the transit-oriented development areas. So for the short-term rental accommodations, so the City of Nanaimo does have regulations around short-term rentals. Now that we've reviewed the regulations the province is proposing, we're actually in a really good spot. Our regulations are actually stricter than what the province is proposing. And really what the province is proposing is giving us the powers we don't have, which is getting information from the platforms, like Airbnb, for example, as well as having the province include an enforcement component. So really it's going to strengthen our ability to manage short-term rentals in Nanaimo. And
Sorry, Kasia, can I ask a question? Just because I'm not familiar, what is your current, and the reason I'm specifically asking is our most recent DP on the hospital campus includes 12 small units, but they are for short-term rentals for locums and residents who come, doctors who come to do training at our hospital. So what is your current, like, do you have a short-term?
it has to be within a primary residence. So that wouldn't
necessarily apply?
Yeah, that could be more looked at like a hotel concept, which other jurisdictions have looked at,
Okay.
where you're having multiple units available, but for a specific use, like you're saying.
Okay. I know that Christine chatted with me about it to say would the new legislation apply to that building because it's it is being specifically built to accommodate the need to get the doctors at the hospital, so.
Mhm.
Okay.
So ours looks at requiring it within the primary residence, so does the province.
Okay.
Yeah. They're looking at increasing fines from $1,000 to $3,000. And then, like I said, strengthening the tools for local governments that we didn't have the authority to have before. Returning more short-term rentals back to the long-term homes and establishing provincial rules and enforcement. So they're gonna have their own enforcement wing. We don't really know what this is all gonna look like. It's gonna be a wait and see, but overall it's looking quite positive. We also have the federal government also getting their hand in short-term rentals. So they're looking at removing the ability for people to write off their business expenses related to short-term rentals, in addition to other measures. So there's quite a bit coming down for short-term rentals across Canada and British Columbia. Next we have Bill 44, so this is a small-scale multi-unit housing. This is going to allow 3 to 4 units permitted on lots currently zoned for single-family or duplex uses, depending on lot size. That'll be as of right. You'll have the ability to build 3 to 4 units on your parcel, depending on if you're near frequent transit or not. That's not related to frequent transit, that's everywhere. 6 units permitted on large lots currently zoned for single-family or duplexes use and close to transit stops with frequent service. So frequent service is normally described as a bus coming every 15 minutes.
As Dale Lindsay would point out, again, very well intentioned, but if you're a developer, what's the sense of assembling 4 or 5 lots to put up 100 units when you can very quickly, without doing anything, throw up 4 or 5 units on a single family lot? So again, that's another example of where, and Dale can't say he said this because he didn't tell me he did this, but when the non-disclosure agreement was circulated amongst many municipal officials, but not politicians, I think it's fair to say that was one of the comments that came out of this. Again, well-intentioned, but just looking at Bob in particular and Donna, who have no small experience, and Dave in development and real estate, that it has some unintended
Well, it
consequences.
de-incentivized for sure. My question is actually for Bill. So if I have an existing single-family dwelling and I'm on a large lot, and I can now add 5 additional units to create 6. Where's my infrastructure? My
Exactly.
water size, my sewer size? I don't know how you're getting hydro.
This is what we're concerned about, and we
Yeah.
have to sort of get our heads around. And OCP, or the city plan, has sort of designated these already, sort of a very refined method, along the corridors and in urban centers. But far-flung properties, we don't know how they're supposed to provide fire flow. Is our biggest example. Parking is going to be another
A
massive
nightmare.
headache.
Yeah.
So this is the thing that, as the mayor mentioned,
Yeah.
is well-intentioned. Let's increase the number of houses, but the downstream consequences for municipalities, it almost seems like this is going to create a huge burden for taxpayers. The only thing we can think of is, either jacking up DCCs to an unacceptable level, that's not really an option, or limiting development in some ways or requiring development to deal with their own fire flow through sprinklers and materials and that sort of stuff. So that's not a very attractive.
No, then you're jacking your square foot price and you're on level with commercial at that point, or the multifamily for smaller unit. I mean, I've heard several people have approached me about this conversation, like, oh, hey, I've got a parcel of land, what is your opinion? My opinion is, I don't know that you have enough water. Or I don't know, I come to your neighborhood and I don't think, everybody wants the 200 amp service, I'm pretty sure you're not getting that. And what is that, as particularly as we look at other guidelines coming in for air conditioning in buildings and stuff like that, like you have to have bigger, and we're not having Fortis, we're not using liquefied natural gas, so now it has to be power, and these are the concerns I have, but I knew right away, I thought, oh, Bill will have the exact same concerns as me, is we don't have infrastructure, particularly in existing neighborhoods or big estate properties that exist, like there's some great estate properties that could easily handle, a nice little development to add the additional residents. But I don't, one guy does it and the other 10 guys don't. Is he paying to upgrade all the water and sewer and power? That makes that project unaffordable.
Well, turn to your left, and Mark's been very quiet and reserved this morning, but I know what he's thinking. Where the heck do we put all the kids who are going to move in their parents to these places.
But the predictability certainly would be nice to follow, have an OCP to plan where those schools are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is, Reimagine Nanaimo got ahead of this, right? And then we had that Bill was here and I said to him, if you remember, I said, Bill, you're right, because I was talking about this whole idea of getting rid of single family zoning generally, like trying, because that's coming. Obviously it came, but the province has delivered it in a really unhelpful way, to your point. And yeah, it's really unfortunate.
And the likelihood is gonna happen over a long period of time, and it'll be sort of distributed, and if people discover it's uneconomic, or maybe there's isolated location, that's not gonna have a major impact on infrastructure, but, you know, I think our minds immediately jump to every single cul-de-sac that's 4 units in it now. But that's, might be a fallacy as well, so I'm trying to figure out what it really, it truly means about moving places.
So I saw a study out of Oregon, maybe a year ago now. Anyway, they were tracking, because they removed single family, and it has had marginal impact. People aren't actually densifying across broad areas, they just haven't done it. So that could be the case here too. In fact, then, you know, with the guidance from OCP, just doing those major corridors instead, that might happen, so we'll see. So they thought, you know, it would all be chaotic there, and it hasn't been.
I suppose I'd say though that I'd want to know, is it not happening because quote unquote the market isn't interested in it, or because municipal government has said, sorry, we simply don't have the infrastructure, and we can't, unless you want to have sewers backing up or low pressure like that Seinfeld episode in your water system. We can't let you do it. Anyway, Cassia, the fact that everyone's asking questions, it's a good presentation, so.
The other thing I'll know, so the province did hold a Q&A on Monday for municipalities and regional districts, and it was communicated by so many of the jurisdictions exactly these concerns, especially ones that have, you know, very little staff, don't have the capacity. The province came back and said we could be an extension. You know, it was communicated even with an extension, where does the money come to upgrade all this infrastructure? So it is being communicated to the Ministry of Housing, the Ministry of Transportation, but this is what regime we're working on right now. Bill 46 is development financing, so they're introducing a new amenity cost charge. So the intent is to pay for capital costs such as community centers, thanks Natalie, recreation centers and libraries.
Technology.
So overall, we're in a good spot with this. City plan identifies generally our amenity needs. Schedule 5 is a good example where it identifies most of our park needs. So these would be upfront costs the developers would be aware of that would be paid towards during development. They also gave us the ability to expand our development cost charges to include fire protection facilities, police facilities, and solid waste facilities. So that's something that is a positive. Bill 47, transit-oriented development areas. So there's a provincial standard for minimum allowable height and density within a certain distance of a transit hub, and it removes parking minimums with some exemptions. So I haven't had a chance to read all the regulations yet, but so far, Woodgrove, Country Club, and Vancouver Island University have been identified as 3 transit-oriented development areas in Nanaimo. And what they've done is they've drawn a 200-meter circle and a 400-meter circle around our existing bus exchanges and have pre-zoned the land
Actually,
for us.
I have the policy documents and regulations really just were given to us, I think, last Thursday or something like that, and I have been reading them quite carefully, and I'm not sure we have to pre-zone. So that's a conversation we'll have as staff, but it's looking like we have to pass a TOA bylaw, and that there may still be an opportunity for rezoning and negotiating, not for density, but for other needs. So we're on that, and through our quick scribe service, I had an opportunity to ask Bill Buchholzer that question.
Right, so that,
So we'll, new information is coming every day on this subject, so you'll have to stay tuned.
It's evolving.
As-
Yeah,
as-
thank you, Lisa.
As Dale and staff point out though, I mean, you know, obviously there's a great deal of money going into the downtown exchange, which has been somewhat controversial for some folks, but having said that, it's not included, and transit exchange has been moved the downtown are what, 4 times in 10 or 20 years or whatever. So if it gets shifted, this one's not likely to shift, but in other communities, what's the impact of that? I mean, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? If we put the transit exchange there, hopefully you're gonna see an increase in use, and therefore the rules would say, well, the densification follows, or do you go to existing areas only, and where a lot of this is underway. It's all very interesting.
Your worship, this is a good example where all of these are, like you say, are really well intended, but the message we've been trying to relay back to the province is the context matters. The local government understands the context, and this one here highlights this better than any of that. So if you just pick a transit exchange and you run a 200 meter or a 400 meter, distance around that, well, at VIU that puts you up at College Heights. So densifying College Heights because your proximity to VIU makes 0 sense, but from the province's perspective, it does. Other communities are saying, well, we have a river separating our transit exchange from where you're increasing density. How do you expect people to get there? And their answer is, well, we did a mapping exercise, and that's the 200 meter bubble, and we just keep coming back saying the context really matters. Like, local governments understand this better, but so far it's fallen on
Absolutely.
deaf ears.
So this relates also to that pre-zoning for affordable housing project because of the context of the scope being urban centers and corridors. So it gives us an opportunity now that we know the TOA areas that they've identified to look at that pre-zoning opportunity in the other urban centers because they're not part of this legislation. That's it.
Well, thank you.
Good job.
Any questions or comments?
Well, I mean, you have my empathy on trying to deal with this. I mean, we stepped away from, we moved to performance-based planning like 30 years ago, which is what you set out some broad ambitions and then context, because I'm a context junkie. Context defines the final product, right? I mean, this is just unbelievable. Like, it's one thing to say, we urge you to do this, and maybe there's some funding attached kind of generally to encourage you, but to put it in legislation is top down. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. We know that. Everything is context based. It's just, it's shocking. So, I feel bad for you.
Has this impacted like slowing people down? Like the one thing is you figure that if you're a big developer, you're like, okay, the government's gonna do all my work for me now, so I'm gonna stop my planning. Like, have you seen an impact on actually the ironic part of slowing down?
Anecdotally, Jeremy can probably speak to some examples, but the big example we have right now, Mark, is sandstone. So we've done months, if not years of work on sandstone to get it to a point where we're confident with the densities, the mix, not creating single family only neighborhoods, but mix of housing types, but getting it to a point where we know the infrastructure can be upgraded to support it, and maybe not more importantly, but equally important, Ministry of Highways is able to sign off on the bylaw. So we've got all that, we're ready to present it to council, and all of a sudden all this comes in. And now we're like, we don't know what we're approving. So it's had to put that whole project on hold while we figure out, are we asking council to approve 600 units, or are we asking council to approve 2,400 units? We're not really sure. So, and of course you got two different ministries kind of giving us different answers. So that's an extreme example where it's had an impact in putting a very large project on hold while we sort this out. But yeah, there's numerous other ones I think where speculation's already occurred, or where people are holding off on projects because they're not sure how to proceed. So.
It's providing some challenges, I say, well-intentioned. I mean, no municipal government should ever go to war with provincial government. It's kind of like the old line about, in politics, you don't get into a fight with people buying by the barrel, so you don't go after the media. But I'm hopeful that there's enough, including the BC Urban Mayor's Caucus, because we were discussing, that was the only topic we had at our meeting the other morning, was a letter to go to, it'll be made public, I'm telling secrets out of school this morning. Letter saying basically you need to consider and look at this very carefully and come back to Dave's line about context. Dale, it's It's important. Because, I mean, there's nobody who doesn't want to see people prosper, people have places to live, but how can you achieve it? And, you know, Bob's point, I think what you're driving at around, you know, partnerships, I mean, and I've said this before too many times, everything I say is repetitive. You know, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the private sector provided housing for people who would otherwise be homeless. They were crappy, they lived in motels in Vancouver, whatever. But, you know, you took the welfare portion of the check for housing and you provided that. That doesn't exist anywhere in the province anymore. Those units are gone. And so we're left with no other choice other than living in parks or the government doing something. And you know, is there a way, I mean, is it possible to encourage the private sector to develop the kinds of units, and this is something I'm rather fond of, smaller units, subsidize the rent, if you will, but get the private sector to build it and or government where appropriate, etc. I mean, I think there are some opportunities, and I think they need to start looking at all of that, because I think municipalities are by and large ready to encourage and recognize smaller units. I mean, that's just a reality. We're the only place in the world where everybody expects to have 2,000 or 3,000 square feet to live in. Well, that ain't the way of the world. I mean, you look at people who come from Hong Kong, even millionaires for heaven's sakes, and what they're used to in terms of square footage and housing accommodation. And if we're increasingly, we have been an urban society for over 100 years since the end of the First World War, so let's get on with the program, but just not sure that this is going to work. So I encourage all of you to use your collective voices of power in the ears of politicians. Dale?
Your Worship, maybe turning it back to part of the earlier conversation, I think this is challenging. I think the only message we want the task force to understand today is, you know, staff have just received some of this. Even though we were promised the regulations, we literally got the regulations on one section on Monday, I think it was Monday, so here we are, we've had 5 days to fully kind of wrap our heads around some of it, so we're still working on it. But going back to the earlier conversation, you're mentioning about the need for housing, and we've done a number of studies, and Christy can talk about our housing needs report. We know that we need to build around 1,100 units a year to keep up with demand. The not surprising fact in that report is we know that we need a significant number of those to be family housing. We know that, I think the number in my head is 60% of those units need to be affordable.
525 need to be non-market.
So that's a very specific number, so.
Yeah.
So the point,
It's a good report.
so the point is we need the majority of those, or half of those anyways, to be affordable housing. And you need, we can do what we can to move the levers, you know, that we have at zoning to encourage it, but really from my perspective, maybe it needs consistent investment from the province and the feds, which has been missing for far too long, to help us get to that target. That's what's really missing.
Yeah.
Another thing I'd like to add too is over the past 10 years, our unit count, annual unit count has increased in a really gradual, normal way. So in the past 10 years, maybe from approximately 750 units per year to last year, what was it? 1,300.
Yeah.
This year might be a little bit less. So, you know, and in Nanaimo, we have had pre-zoned land for multifamily use for many years. It's been there, sitting, waiting. You know, it's not like a rezoning was needed. You just need to apply for a development permit and build it. But it's more about the market. It's more about other things. So I don't know that our unit count, annual unit count, is going to suddenly jump up because of these provincial regulations in Nanaimo. Like, I just don't see that happening. So it'll just spread the units in different ways that we didn't anticipate or want to encourage through city plan process. Yeah.
And I think too that around the supportive housing or non-market housing, we just got a report yesterday, I think, from the provincial government on their integrated data report on homelessness numbers. In the last 2 years, I think it was 136 in the province of BC increase in homelessness. You know, and for
What's that?
136%
Yeah,
of the, yeah, you probably saw that press release.
no, I haven't, but I've run the numbers.
Yeah, so you would, yeah, for all of BC, and then specifically in Nanaimo, because it's an integrated data project, so it's a little bit different than the homeless point in time count. The ministries are talking to each other, so they're looking at BC housing data, they're looking at social development and poverty reduction data, as well as health data, and so for 2021, they're saying that Nanaimo has 935 homeless individuals, so, you know, the anecdotal information we were getting from our
That's interesting.
CSOs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's only 2021, and so we know how much can change in 2 years. So hopefully they'll be releasing that on an annual basis. But you can see that the need for the non-market and the preventative work that we can do needs to be done, yeah.
I'm working on 900.
And sorry,
Very
one question before I go to Bob. What was the official count, the last one, 400 and something?
The homeless point, the one for 2023, well, the prelim numbers we got was 517.
Which tells you that
Oh, no,
our folks on the front lines, when I say our folks, the CSOs, the police, the firefighters, et cetera, 935. I've been saying 800 to 1,000 just for a long time because that's what I was hearing.
Right.
We're getting that rather confirmed now, notwithstanding the official count, which we all knew was unrealistic. As I remind everybody, if you think of 80% of Niles population are adults, and I don't know if that figure is even accurate, you take basically 1,000 people, more than 1 in 100 are homeless.
and 70, if I may say, 71% of those based on 2020 are Nanaimoites. They've lived in Nanaimo for more than 5 years, so they're not people wandering here from other parts of the country. Anyway, I
But
won't
sorry,
share,
did
I've
they-
got so
sorry.
much information on this.
I'm wondering on that, if the Nanaimoites, if they've been here, if 5 years is the marker, did they come here as homeless, or did they come here as being in the
No,
market?
they were in the market.
And then they
got pushed
became
out.
homeless?
That's what the data says, under 2020, I don't.
Bob and then Bill?
Just wanted to touch on finance for a minute, and in particular as it relates to shelter housing or affordable housing. It is a really important piece of the puzzle today in terms of the ability to develop those projects. And it's nice that the province is moving down the path of these initiatives, but there's very little in the way of finance offering to help cities and nonprofits to add to the current inventory, which is desperately short. The one piece that I thought was helpful, and I've had a chance to learn a bit more about it, is the Rental Protection Fund. And albeit that was only $500 million, it actually appears as though it's going to be productive at the end of the day in terms of bringing on some truly affordable housing, because you're buying old units, right?
Right.
As opposed to trying to build new ones. And I think one of the challenges we might have as a community is to try and come up with some creative ideas and push the province to try and put some funds together. And I think can't be somehow accessed, for example, the Municipal Finance Authority funds to help with some of these projects? I mean, we need to find cheaper money somewhere. Certainly trying to find it in the current market is not easy. And while rates may decline a little bit in 2024, it won't be a huge change. So I think it'd be nice to have a longer discussion around financing and how we might encourage the province to come to the table.
All gets back to money. And I'm Bill, and then we should probably get on to the next topic, but I'm also conscious of the fact that we've all figured out in the last 10, 20, 30 years that healthcare relates a lot to poverty and social conditions and housing, so all crucial. Bill, sorry.
Your Worship, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we heard a little bit of a presentation from Lisa and Christie on this week. There was an interesting number from the city of Vancouver and their level of homelessness. So I don't know if you want to repeat that here in this context, but
the number of homeless, I can't remember exactly, I think it was 24, just over 2,400 individuals in the city of Vancouver are homeless. But the majority of them have only 30% are unsheltered. So what that means is that they don't have access to emergency shelter or they don't have access to SRO. That's kind of how they define that in the city of Vancouver. But here, if you look just at our homeless point in time count, if we're using 517, we have 76 shelter beds. So over 80% of ours are unsheltered, so they don't have access to emergency shelter or any type of housing or shelter. So that's pretty alarming.
But in the bigger context, we have 900 though who are unhoused in a city of 104,000. The city of Vancouver has, I think, what are we, 575,000 in Vancouver, or something?
Yeah, it's about 600, yeah.
That's 6 times our size and
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And way more
less than
resources.
3 times the number
Yeah.
of people in shelter. Anyways, thank you very much. That was a great discussion. I think Paul's point about talking about financing and what we could do at some point would be very useful. Have a discussion around it with respect to former banker and developer and because one of the student business person brings the conversation, coupled with some others who've had a peripheral interest in this topic.
Might I say, just an observation that this is an incredible problem and challenge, but the fact we're actually talking about it, we're talking about it, right? When you start talking about things, you start to move to solutions. So I commend the city for exploring these issues. Thank you.
Well, on to technology. Carrie Ng, our Director of IT and CIO, presentation of fiber strategy. And I have to tell you, Carrie, you'll be surprised yesterday because I had to do a CLE course because I still keep up my bachelor's certificate. And my son managed to get my laptop operating in an appropriate way, but it meant that I couldn't get it sent out or receive emails on my Apple phone, which is supposed to be connected. I figured it out on my own. It's a Christmas
Gary, take the rest of the year off.
It's an inside city joke about my incredible incompetence.
Oh dear. So we awarded at the council meeting, we awarded the honorary nerd prize, not to you, but I think it definitely could go to you for what you've accomplished and probably, God bless YouTube, among other things that you may have used to get that done. So, hello everyone, I'm Carrie Ng, I'm the Director of IT, and this is a return visit because I was with you about 5 months ago, give or take, talking about City Fiber, and really at that point getting your recommendations and feedback in terms of what happened in the past. And so since that time, I've done homework, considering releasing much more background information in terms of activities that my predecessor had done, conversations with Mr. Sims, Mr. Corson, but also connecting in with the telcos, so connecting in with representatives from TELUS, representatives from Rogers, now Shaw and Rogers, and then reaching out to my peers, City of Kelowna, City of Delta, City of Coquitlam, all of whom have been on the fiber path, the fiber journey for probably anywhere from 15, 20 years, give or take, where they have an expansive fiber network that only connects to their city facilities, but then they resell it. In the case of Coquitlam, in New Spencer, for example, they have their own ISP, for lack of better words, which is QNet and Bridgenet, so they resell their dark fiber and actually lit fiber as well. The City of Kelowna, since 2015, did significant investment in terms of expanding their fiber footprint, and they're reselling dark fiber. City of Delta has been on a 10-15 year journey as well, and they're yet to resell the strand, but that is the plan. So this conversation is a summary of the information that I've collected, some options that I'm looking for feedback and recommendations from all of you, and then a conversation about what I'm figuring out as my next step and the focus for going forward. Agenda. Really want to focus on really the options, so we'll kind of get moving forward. This is also in response to the conversation from council, and this was actually from the feedback from the Mayor's Leader Table on August 28th, council for staff to prepare a report in consultation with community partners, just in regards to how we want to make investments in our fiber. What is our fiber strategy? What recognitions do we want to do? The question I believe Councillor Manley asked was, or Councillor Brown, do we want to become a utility? And so I'm hoping this conversation can be an input in terms of the overall recommendation that we want to put forward. From a timeline perspective, I'm quite certain all of you, or most of you, familiar with the Mayor's Task Force about a few years ago, and then from the task force was the Infrastructure Ask Working Group. Community Fiber Optic Network was one of the 5 pillars, or one of the 5 objectives. And then, in 2023, we had the council motion. What I want to draw attention to is in between the dots, and the work that was done by my predecessor, and the conversations that he had with some of the partners, as well as the telcos, and then the conversations that I had up to this moment. So in between 2020 and 22, my predecessor had commissioned a report. It was a telecommunications strategy report. He worked with an organization called Asset Markets, and the principal is Jeff Davis. And the idea was to take a look at the existing fiber coverage that the city had, and then provide recommendations in terms of how to make investments. Investments could be status quo, investments could be expand so that you provide redundancy to your facilities, partnership up with VIU and other regional partners to find out where cost sharing opportunities could be, and do you want to become a utility? And the benefits and considerations for really doing all 3. So I drew heavily on that report. I connected in with Mr. Davis probably 2 months ago just as a bit of an update. But the findings are still relatively the same because we're dealing with infrastructure on the ground and some aerial as well. To today, the activities included having conversations with the telcos. We have account representatives who give us lots of attention sometimes. And so they were quite forthright in terms of sharing what their coverage maps are and their intentions going forward in terms of in-ground fiber and cellular services, but also having conversations, like I said, with my peers. How are you doing? What were the impetus in terms of moving forward with it? What are your partnerships like? How is it going in terms of connecting your own facilities, but then leasing and servicing the sites that are to external parties? So the next slide is again a bit of a repeat in terms of the motion, but from the conversations that I've had and the background information discussions I've had, some of the options that we're considering are expanding our existing fiber so that we connect, provide redundancy amongst our facilities, actively pursuing partnerships, so spending the time working with the partners, identifying those locations where we could do cost sharing, considering becoming a utility. Do we want to expand our network to such an extent that we have the excess capacity that we can provide dark fiber, or we provide lit fiber and lit fibers, that we would provide end-to-end internet service on this to commercial residents, for example, or businesses, and or even to the telcos, because they're always interested in additional fiber strands, or continue on the path that we're currently on. Before getting into those options, I just want to provide a snapshot in terms of this is our current in-ground and aerial fiber infrastructure. We have approximately 7 kilometers, and we are connecting our priority facilities. Now, this information came from a report that was commissioned back in 21-22, and into some updates from Mr. Davis, as well as connecting in with our GIS teams. So we have fiber connectivity amongst Municipal Hall, this building, Fire Station 1, and about 6 other sites. And what we love about this is that we have full control over the communication for that. So fiber to data is roads to traffic, roads to cars. So we can increase bandwidth, we can decrease bandwidth. We have full control over the communication types amongst the sites. So we're not reliant upon TELUS and or Rogers or Shaw in terms of facilitating those sites and increasing or lowering bandwidth. The problem, though, or the risk that we have currently, is that each of the sites represent a single point of failure. All information, regardless of where it's coming from along our fiber footprint, so whether it's NIT or NAC or Public Works, it all needs to terminate here. So all roads lead to, what I mean by that is once a data packet arrives here, so Your Worship, as you were working on your computer and looking at YouTube for references, you would, if you're on a city site, you would have came here, and then from here, you would have went out to the internet. So this is where the roads terminate, and this is how you get out. And this is significant because more and more services are going cloud-based. So no longer do we have servers in a premise, right? So if you needed to access your email, no longer is it you actually hit the servers here, you actually get to here, go out to the internet, and then get into Microsoft's cloud environment, which is anywhere in, say, Alberta or Markham or Quebec, to access those services. So getting here is critical. Before, getting here to do the information was the default. Now, getting here to get out is becoming the default business model. So the importance of that is, as these are single points of failure, if there's an outage at any of the locations along the chain, if you're on the wrong side of the outage, you are without connectivity. Right, you're stuck, absolutely. Some of our sites we have redundancy. Some of our sites we have redundancy from the telcos. For example, at Fire Station 1, that's a major hub for us, and the UNC is there. We have redundant connections with, there's another connection from the Chalmers Shaw. We also have Starlink. And so Starlink, so in the event that there's an outage to here, in the event that there's an outage on maybe a terrestrial service from TELUS, we can go out. We can go literally up in terms of getting internet connectivity for could be for emergency service workers, could be plain old outage, right? Just without having any natural disaster attached to it. The bottom line is that everything, all roads lead to here. And so that's the concern, is that we have to build redundancy so that we can protect against that. To do so, right, will there be costs associated to it, whether we build it or whether we need to partner up and provision more services from the telcos. So we have options. And this is really the foundational piece in terms of the conversation in the next couple of minutes in terms of what are those options. Just for more context as well is broadband coverage from TELUS and Rogers. So again, we've had conversations with representatives, and they've had, in particular TELUS, significant investments in the community with fiber services. And then with Rogers now in the game too, their likelihood that they'll be making investments to their network as well. But even prior to that, Shaw made some major investments in terms of putting in fiber routes in the downtown core around VIU up in Woodgrove. So between the two of them, they can hit over 95% of the addresses with their broadband services. Now, I want to delineate between broadband and fiber. Broadband could be coax. Not DSL anymore, but it doesn't necessarily need to be fiber to the home. You can still get plenty of speed, plenty of bandwidth on a coax cable to do basic internet surfing, or to facilitate for small and a lot of medium-sized businesses is their digital demands are not, they're not programmers, they're not gamers, they're not a bunch of teenagers in a basement doing gaming. Right? So the telcos can hit the majority of the addresses, the heavy majority of the addresses, with services that would meet or exceed the current need and probably would have the scalability going forward. So our service, our current infrastructure is limited. We have single points of failure, we have control over it, single points of failure. And the telcos, the area blanketed. So we have options in terms of what we want to do with our city fiber investments. Any questions at all? Okay, so getting into the options. First option is to expand. And I've highlighted the routes going north and then going south. Really, it's the main route that we can focus on is one, pretty much terminate at Municipal Hall, maybe into VICC, working its way north, maybe terminating up at Bevan. And what the expansion would be is doubling, for all intents and purposes, the existing capacity. So no longer would there be single points of failure, no longer be a single strand per se, but there would be loops. So that in the event of an outage, well, before you were going north or you were coming south to get to the SARC building, well, you could actually move east and then work your way back down because you have that redundant connection. This gives us, going with this route is future-proofing, because we know that digital demand application services are going to go up. So we know that every site we go to, there's going to be increasing demand for bandwidth. We would have full control over the network, and we would reduce our reliance on telcos, and because we'd have that redundancy. And there could even be opportunities, if we were to go down this path, to find partnerships. There's VIU or other, if there were sites that we could share cost on that made sense in terms of making sure that we could hit those priority facilities. And then further, there could be opportunities for reselling excess capacity. It would cost money, and it would increase, there'd be staff costs as well in terms of working with Mr. Sims' teams and others to identify those sites and build that into the existing 5 and 10-year capital plans. They're not currently in there, so there would be increases to it. And also we want to do assessments in terms of, well, if we were to build redundancy in this particular location, what could we do if we bought it from the telco? Because as telco services are the footprint is very good, the prices are coming down a little bit per se, and there's opportunities for us to actually secure those networks and have good control of those networks versus just having our own pipe. Cost recovery on this, it's an estimate, it really is, because we're looking at potentially 17 kilometers of fiber, a capital investment of anywhere from 5 to 10 million, and that's to be determined. And more assessment would be required, more analysis would be required on that. Second option is partnership. And these options may not stand alone, there's definitely be opportunities to amalgamate them. This is actively pursuing partnerships with regional district, VIU, the hospital, et cetera. We could, first and foremost, we just establish relationships. I know that my predecessor had conversations with individuals from VIU, we had conversations with others, and I had conversations with the regional district of Nanaimo. From those, but at the time though, nothing was committed per se, no agreements had happened. So I don't want to say we have to start from scratch, but we definitely have to start from a beginning point to just identify what do we need to do, where are particular locations, and well, are they already being serviced today and tomorrow by the telcos? Does it make sense for us to actually do a partnership in terms of cost sharing and administrative sharing of the asset? Considerations is, well, there would be staff resources, of course, increases to our budgets, and some of the connections, they may or may not hit our priority facilities. And one of the primary things that I would love to see though is have that redundancy just amongst our own facilities and then see where we can expand from there. Cost recovery would be completely project dependent. Right. So again, I haven't identified anything on this map here in terms of where we could go, but if we wanted to have any cost sharing opportunities, we'd want to start from one of our existing positions versus having a position that we didn't have an existing site. And the other option is pursuing becoming a utility. All the benefits of the first two, the report that I referenced earlier made a recommendation of 30 kilometers of fiber in the ground or area, et cetera. This is also, I believe, in the integrated action plan as a target. And there'd be opportunity for revenue generation. The opportunity to provide services to maybe some areas that were underserved by the telcos per se, opportunities to partner up, and then opportunities to resell services, and then hope to have a shorter cost recovery. Significant investments, however. Significant investments to our 5 and 10-year budgets. The city of Coquitlam, the city of New Westminster, city of Kelowna, they're a separate business unit. So headcount in terms of operating, administering this line of the business. There's overhead, there's marketing of course, and also working with the CRTC to get certifications of becoming a CLEC because you're reselling services and sometimes they're easy to play with and sometimes they're not. So there's opportunity for revenue generation, but there's a significant administrative burden, I would suggest, becoming a utility. You're also going to become a direct competitor to the telcos. And in Kelowna's example, as it was shared to me from my peer, was they were, quite aggressive in their investment, or they really wanted to expand. But then TELUS, and they had a partnership lined up with one of their partners, and TELUS came in and said, well, we can give you a better deal. That's going to happen. So it's just one of the considerations that we want to have if we wanted to go down this path. Or we do, I don't want to say do nothing, but status quo. What is currently in the budget, what is currently planned. Now we have about 5 kilometers over the next 10 years. Some of that will actually provide some loops amongst certain sites, but it doesn't protect them coming all the way back here. Like we talked about, all roads lead here in terms of getting out to the internet. No change to the existing budget. Does not take IT capacity away from the priorities that we currently have. We have to secure the network, we're replacing a financial system, among other major activities that, well, there's no shortage of work, to say the very least. However, by not doing more, we are willingly increasing our reliance and potentially cost on the telcos. Further, there's opportunity cost, like for not partnering with Bill's team on a civil engineering project or taking a look at other technologies that would make sense from a budget perspective to actually expand our services. So where's our focus? So what our next steps are is to push forward on a strategy that is an expansion plus. So it is focusing on our priority facilities, determining how we can create redundancy amongst those sites so that there's multiple ways of getting back to here for accessing the internet. But in addition to that, maybe providing internet access at each of the facilities so they don't necessarily need to come back here. Expanding our fiber coverage, and then also seeing where there could be opportunities for partnerships, and even if we had excess capacity to resell. These would be opportunity-based and they wouldn't be the priority focus for us. The priority focus with us is to increase overall redundancy amongst our sites. So we'd have full control for the foreseeable future of connectivity amongst the city sites. Key to that, so I talked about reliance on telcos. There definitely be a staff resource requirement. However, I would say that this is complementary to what we're currently doing. We have relationships with Bill's team. We're looking at capital projects where we could partner up and really reduce the cost of putting conduit in the ground, and then sharing information with our peers. Like what strategies have you done in terms of putting more fiber in the ground or in the air at the lowest cost possible, so that you increase your overall network control and future-proofing your connectivity requirements for your staff, as well as just reducing your overall reliance with the telcos. I think that's it.
Well, just to circle back to your first presentation, we did talk a little bit about satellite-based communication and Starlink, and you mentioned that or hall number 1 is using Starlink as a backup.
Correct.
Is that a consideration or was that considered in terms of the process going forward?
As a redundant connection?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have, and it's even in place too, in addition to the fire station, we have built, correct me if I'm wrong, at the treatment plant, I believe, or at
And at the dams as well.
the dam as well.
So
But I would not, at this stage, I think it's still a bit, the technology is a bit immature and the reliability is not there just yet. So I'd say for the next 5-10 years, it would be a secondary or tertiary link versus a primary link to facilitate communications amongst the sites. 5G would be there as well. So I didn't get into the 5G side. So we can have, in addition to have redundancy, we'd have technology redundancy. So you'd have land-based fiber as a primary, then you would have cellular as a secondary, and then you'd have Starlink satellite as a tertiary. So you have 3 ways of getting out. And as the majority of services are moving more cloud, more into the internet, we'd be giving options. So if one were to fail, we'd go to the second. So if that were to fail, we'd go to Starlink. And then throughout the entire time is that the technology would be saying, are you awake, are you back, are you back, and then it would fail back. So we wouldn't be stuck on the Starlink service for an indefinite period because it'd always be saying, hey, in-ground fiber, are you awake, are you awake? And when it was, then the information would shift to that primary route.
Dave and then Mark.
And so I hesitate because I'm absolutely, I'm a non-techie like you, Leonard. So I just reflected on the conversations we had at the infrastructure task force, and I remember when we talked about this item and it became one of the 5 priorities. I think there's 2 things for me. One is that I think it's funny, redundancy is something we want, which is generally what we don't want, but in this case we want it. The need to have redundancy for municipal facilities, I think, is it's gotta be done, right? So that's over there for me. And I'm just reflecting on the infrastructure. The committee, we saw this as, to be explored as a real economic incentive tool that we could market, and Nanaimo is kind of fully integrated when it comes to networking. So that, I just make that comment, right? And so what do we need to do that? And as you say, you provide some great analysis here, so thanks for that. I think we want to be cost effective, but at the end of the day, whatever we do, I think, if I remember back on that committee, we really were looking at this as a fundamental part for growing our economy. Now, and I, again, not a tech guy, I can't say more than that. So just put that on the table.
Mark?
Well, two points. One is, we're in the school district, we're facing becoming all things to all people. And so to become a utility for a city that struggles, you're gonna struggle to continue to hire people to take out the trash, and we've got a crisis on our hands with housing. So don't mean to be pessimistic about that point, but it makes sense to take advantage to expand infrastructure when you can, but I don't know if the city wants to get into that business. But the other question, and sorry I wasn't here for the parts of the discussions, is there any risk that it disincentivizes, like the city expanding what it offers, disincentivizes the telcos to provide better service generally? Because I will say the thing coming from Victoria, this town is terrible for, I know this is not cell connection, I'm not talking internet, that's fine.
Sure.
But like, do the telcos go, okay, great, you're doing it yourself, we don't need to put, like, is the pressure to make them add more services to the city almost just as good a strategy, obviously with the redundancies in mind?
I can only draw from the information that I've received from the city of Kelowna, is that once the city decided to start reselling dark fiber, reselling the infrastructure, TELUS upped their game. They upped their game and they lowered their prices. And for the bigger accounts and multiple sites, it was very difficult. TELUS made it very difficult for the city to make having penetration. So I don't know if incentivize as much as incents the telcos to get more aggressive on the marketing, and get more aggressive on the pricing.
So maybe we say we're gonna go that direction.
We act like it, it's in the plan, to back off.
Sorry, yes.
No, go ahead, Nazar.
I just, it's becoming a direct competitor with organizations such as this, especially with the recent investment that TELUS had in terms of pure fiber in the city. Now, yes, of course, there's areas that are underserved. It would be very difficult, I would suggest, for us to resell the services with recovery model that would see become cash neutral, for example, in 20 years, if not longer. It would be very difficult for that.
I have some of the similar concerns that Mark has expressed about becoming a utility competitor. One of my concerns, maybe a little bit broader, I'm actually working in Parksville right now for a client who is a video game company owned out of LA. So I have spent the last 6 months dealing with TELUS because the connection piece has to go. And so we're held up now, not by what's on the island, but the connection between Victoria and Seattle.
Okay.
And so, the city becoming a utility, I guess in my mind, I'm wondering, well, if your services are located here, that's lovely if you're here, but if our draw is to bring more people here, those people are gonna be owned by other companies that are bigger, that need connections in more places that we can't provide that service. I mean, that's just one consideration. My one recommendation, I love redundancy, because I see how important that is actually from the port perspective. When we talk about climate change, redundancy is key to keeping everything flowing, right? I love the expansion idea, and my only input would be to expand outside of only city-owned facilities. Like, I'm presuming when South End Community Center goes ahead, there would be connection there. I get why it's at Bevan, because that's one of your emergency locations, right? But why not do a connection to the hospital, right? And I get that that's where I'm coming, my background is from the hospital, but as you look at expansion, adding in, and I don't know if the university would want to tie, but looking at some of those, when you mentioned partnerships and what that looks like, I think those conversations should be being had now.
That's agreed.
Particularly as the hospital has some pretty big expansion pieces that are about to happen, those conversations would be timely right now.
Agreed, and
Yeah.
we'll be reaching out to establish relationships.
So I just want to echo both Donna and Dave's comments from an economic perspective. Making sure the expansion, I think, it's critical for businesses to be able to have that connectivity and the integration. And so I think I think this is a good plan and a good strategy. It's just how do we implement that strategy, and again, I also support Mark and the concern of becoming a competitor to the telcos, and just do we fully understand what that means to become a utility, and so, but again, putting on the NPC hat, the expansion of connectivity is crucial to attract businesses.
For what it's worth, I mean, there's certain things I believe the state should always be delivering. Some very basic essentials, and I think you could argue this is essential, but at the same time, the pace of change in terms of technology, and I say this as the outsider, that companies that expect to survive have to be on the cutting edge in order to survive, and willing to make the investments that they have to make in order to outlast their competition. So I think this is one area where I'm certainly on board with what I've heard so far. I don't think we want to be in competition, but sometimes you can play a little poker and leverage some progress and change that benefits you, but it's not like providing water and sewer.
We can also, and then it's also just becoming a partner, where we can try to influence, to try and get our voice and then tell us to move over the Rogers table and say, just identify areas that just needs connectivity. And it could even be existing places that you just need more pipe, you need a bigger road, as opposed to maybe going into an area that has nothing. So we have plenty of conversations with our representatives, and we've had conversations with some of their bosses too. So it's really establishing those relationships and doing what we can to influence where they put their investments in the city.
So there is a recommendation. There are a number of options. Any comments specifically?
We dropped the recommendation again.
Personally, I think the recommendation makes sense. I mean, it gives some redundancy, but doesn't go too far down the path of trying to complicate it by getting into the markets.
The recommendation is to expand with the primary motive to provide redundancy amongst the sites. To look to minimize costs by partnering up with Bill's team to see where there's civil projects that we can reduce costs in terms of putting conduit, and then working with establishing relationships with our partners in the telcos, and then finding opportunities where we are building close to one of their facilities where we could share some of the costs and the administration and overall maintenance of that asset over the life of the asset. That's the right. So a bit of amalgamation with the focus being on establishing redundancy amongst the city's priority facilities.
Yeah, I think that meets what we were hoping for when we had these discussions back in the infrastructure working group, right? So I fully support it.
Is the appropriate motion that we recommend the recommendation or approve of the recommendation? Is that?
It would be a recommendation for council.
Yes.
Yes. I'll move it.
Yeah, I'll second.
Seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Very much appreciated.
Thanks very much.
I tease him constantly because he's one of the youngest people living in Falcon Beach.
I am the youngest person in Walker Beach.
Wow.
No, my wife is a year younger, so. The youngest people in
The next is a rural update, and I'm Regional General Hospital advocacy. I don't know if anyone who's joined us this morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Donna. And the cookies on the table.
Oh, it's tempting me, thank you. Shall we talk about healthcare?
Yes, we can do it, please.
I should preempt my comments with this conversation changes daily. I know, for instance, I can hear it on my truck while I'm driving, so as I was driving to a site at 7 o'clock this morning, I got a long text from a doctor that changes some of the conversation pieces around Island Health. I'm like, oh, well, that might make some of my comments today a little bit more moot. First off, thank you to Mayor and Council for all of their work and their advocacy pieces at UBCM. For your work at the RDN table, your work with other mayors and municipal leaders in the conversation. I do feel that we're making great headway on the advocacy piece. I haven't had a chance to read it. I received MMP's report and statistics around what healthcare looks like for the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. I received it late last night. It also came with our moving forward media proposal and what that looks like and what the various stages are. And I haven't had a chance to go into it in depth yet, and I'm just in the middle of scheduling a meeting for a review with the healthcare ecosystem group on what that all is going to entail, which is going to take us through to the next provincial election, which I thought was October, but I've heard random comments, so we're prepared to move swiftly. I'm excited to see that the Regional District of Nanaimo is also running a parallel campaign. They have been doing, I'm going to call it filming vignettes with various participants and key stakeholders in the healthcare community. I know because they're filming them at our facility since they can't film them at the hospital. And we're about to have a larger scale meeting with the Regional District of Nanaimo, with the healthcare group that I'm working with that helped produce the study, and along with the YES committee has struck a subcommittee on the portion of the media campaign that they're going to be able to participate. And the YES committee has a solid group who is actually going to run a whole bunch of the community citizen pieces, like the rallies, like some of the getting on the chamber docket for our, we have our electoral people doing our debates. So I think we've got about a 6-point strategy there with that group. And we're hoping to organize where all those tables are actually going to come together to run a very comprehensive campaign. One of the key pieces of that campaign is going to be getting the message out to other people outside of just Nanaimo. It's difficult to often change the thinking that when our hospital is named Nanaimo Regional General Hospital, that it's actually the tertiary care hub for everything north of the Malahat. And so we'll be engaging with the MSA groups. We already have their unfettered support. And so MSA is the Medical Staff Association. They're all the surgeons and nurse practitioners and dentists and midwives that work in any of the hospitals north of the Malahat. We're going to be engaging them in this process as well. We've gone to Prosperity Corporation, and I believe that our ecosystem group, they've agreed to become part of our ecosystem group, a member of that, as has the university, which is great. And that group continues to grow. And we're looking at doing a healthcare economic impact study. And so there's some meetings while I was away on vacation around that. And that's to partner with the study that MMP has done for us. So MMP is all the statistics, like what percentage of First Nations on Vancouver Island is NRGH responsible to provide healthcare for? How many people live north of the Malahat. Predominantly, why are our numbers more acute in terms of cardiac care and cancer care than they would be South Island or anywhere else in the province for that matter? Just those types of statistics, that document's probably about 16 pages long last time I read it, so a lot of information to be supported by the economic study, to be supported and backed by this media campaign. And all of that information will be made readily available to the entire public, and will be provided to people who are going to let their names stand in the election. So we're really hoping that the NRGH and the status of what's happening in Nanaimo will become a focal point for the next election. So lots of great stuff, lots of great people coming to the table there. I know that on November 4th, First Nations Health Authority took our economic healthcare ecosystem, of which they are a member, to the province and their ministerial contacts there on behalf of First Nations for Vancouver Island. I think that's a pretty important statement that the nations are actually part of this conversation. It's something that's different and didn't originally happen from everything until at the Cowichan Hospital. There's been lots of Island Health and First Nations conflict at that table, but we've asked them to join us at the table now. The conversations around that are huge. Their roots go all the way back to how operations will be looked at when a new facility is actually built. And I think that's really impactful, and it's going to make us an example for Canada on how we're going to deal with healthcare. So I'm really excited. I get really excited about opportunities like this, that we can actually change what that conversation looks like. And those conversations are actually happening right now. From a physical plant conversation piece, and I'll just mention that I had my first board meeting. I'm now on the hospital foundation board as well, and I've been to my first board meeting there. There's a couple of exciting things. I had the opportunity this past week, as did I understand some of the city, to meet with senior capital planning for Island Health around the cancer center with a projected opening date of 2028. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to be having further meetings with that group about some other core components that are coming and circling around that. I was interested to see one of the primary focuses that's going to come up with the hospital foundation is, even though William Litchfield is going to do a great job on raising funds for what's happening with respect to equipment with inside the cancer facility, we have some really desperate needs right now. So if you were to come to have chemo in Nanaimo, which you can have now, sometimes we can't provide it in Nanaimo because we can't make the drugs. I know that sounds crazy, but our lab facilities for our pharmacy are so inadequate that we cannot produce enough drugs for actually the chemo beds that we have. And that will expand. That's part of the expansion that's coming, as we're getting the 4 radiology beds and we're getting more chemo beds. But one of the things that looks like we're being approved for is, I'm supposed to call it a modular, for a modular that will have four hoods, which will expand our chemo drug producing ability right now. So some of the things we're looking at is what are the wins we can get right now, and how can we be creative about those things while we wait till 2028 to actually happen. So we've got exciting pieces like that happening. One of the disappointing pieces that came up is the HAU beds are being delayed in their opening. It's not about a funding issue. It actually has something to do with, and maybe the city can relate to this, has something to do with the RFP on construction proposal, something that happened in that process that has pushed back the opening of the HAU beds a good 6 to 8 months. We need those 12 beds. Our 12 ICU beds are already full. And so there was something in that process that happened. I don't know the details, but that HAU opening has been delayed. It's coming, just going to be a little bit late. It's not going to be till 2025. So that's a little bit disappointing on that front. I think one of the things that the province will say is exciting, and in some ways it is the announcement that happened with the 350 long-term care beds. We know that the RDN has purchased the property out near Lanceville, and we're going to be building a facility there. Originally, before that announcement happened, it wasn't sounding as exciting as it should, because that was actually relocation of 150 beds and only 200 new beds. Island Health, my understanding, has come back and is looking at some of their existing facilities to make that a full additional 350 beds, which is good for our community. So I say that tongue in cheek. That's exciting news. The disappointing part of that is when you speak with Minister Dix right now, that would be why we're not going to get a new patient tower. Because the long-term care beds, right, will take patients out of the hospital, freeing up space in the hospital, put people into long-term care beds. And so and we can't allow that to happen. We can't allow that. We need the long-term care beds, but we also need the new 600 bed tower. And so as excited as I am about some new infrastructure there, it's almost like we had to give up. And unfortunately, all of that work was done without us knowing that that's what I believe, I believe the final conversation piece was intended to provide some relief without actually having to build a tower for us. So we will continue to fight. I've told you about the advocacy piece. We will continue to fight for that because that is critical for us moving forward. The cath lab conversation. Capital planning has actually been boots on the ground at the hospital looking for locations within the hospital to create a cath lab. We've given them options for, call it like a temporary facility or something less scalable than would have to go in the tower, because obviously the tower is a bigger conversation. BC Cardiac Services, I think I told you last time, is on side with that conversation, has commissioned a study which is going to go to the province. That study is to happen in January. So that work hasn't been done yet, but is to be starting in January. I think we all know we need it. It's a matter of actually proving that and getting the province to provide the funding for it and to get support there. At this point, they are not on side with that. I don't understand why. But what does give me some hope is that on the other side of things, I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with capital planning where they came back to me and said, look, what we really need to know is, do you need just diagnostic or do you need diagnostic and treatment? And I said, we need the full package. So some of the conversation was just around doing diagnostics. You would still have to be sent for treatment to Victoria. I'm like, well, that's great. So we diagnose you here and you still get sent there. What my feedback to them was, we want World Jubilee, you pick that up, you put it in Nanaimo, that's what we'll take. And so if you need like how many square feet and how the layout, you just take that, put it in Nanaimo, and that will work for us. So I do feel like that's promising, because Island Health Capital are looking for the space to accommodate that within their existing structures, or is there some way they can do something on a lesser scale that still gets us those services? We do have our second cardiologist, Dr. Vikram Singh, who started with us. He's young. He's on fire for what's going to happen with cardiology. They're currently recruiting other cardiologists, which is exciting. I need to find more time in my schedule because our heart health clinic is expanding to include a pacemaker clinic, which I'm super excited about. And I would say that right now it's me holding that. I gotta do a few things for them in the heart health clinic. So I better get on that. I can do that this weekend. So I'm excited about that. So there are some new services that are coming here. I would comment that there are some other exciting things happening with Island Health. Island Health now recognizes some of the detriments to attracting doctors to Nanaimo is access to daycare. Myself and Barney Ellis Perry have been in this, and I've actually now seen the white paper on that's come out from Island Health, have been talking about Island Health running their own daycare programs. It's really hard for a private provider to have a facility and say, hey, but we'll only service doctors, MOAs, any medical staff at the hospital, because really that becomes this whole conversation around who you're discriminating against, when that's not the intent. The intent is, if we can provide a package, and we've been in discussion with the family division about this, if we can provide a package that basically says, if you relocate your family here, we will have a place for your children to have daycare, so that a lot of our docs right now are working a 0.5 or a 0.7, and they're doing that because they are co-parenting with no access to childcare. So both parents are working a 0.5 or a 0.7 to be able to still be able to have a family here. And so what we've found is we've done surveys now through the hospital. That's really been a block to us attracting new doctors here. I responded actually about a program for 24 new openings yesterday, where I think we can do something in the interim. I know that's not a lot of kids, but if you think about it, that could be 24 practitioners in our community. That's a huge number. And so I talked about starting something small and to at least get it off the ground, and we have to grow it, and that means I need a conversation with you.
I was about to say,
I need a
let's talk after,
conversation with
because
you. And
we actually do discriminate. We're
Yeah.
the largest single childcare space provider
Yeah.
in the region, and we do discriminate on our sites in the sense that we say teachers
Yeah.
are gonna get first crack at these, and then local
Yeah.
community members,
Yeah.
and then everybody else.
so I do
So
actually
we
have a
can check
mandate
on
from
that.
Island Health now that to have a conversation with you. So anyways, that's just on the aside. So we've done that. I'll just give a quick update on the family division stuff. So thank you to the mayor for having the discussion with Dr. Whitelaw. That was great to bring everybody to the table. Actually, from that meeting, I went to a 2-hour meeting at the family division office. I really want to hear Bill's update on the South End Community Center, and I have some feedback from that meeting on that piece because we have an MOU signed, I understand now, for primary care there, which I'm excited about. One of the things that, and we have 2 doctors now who have signed into the new Hospital Foundation program. So the Hospital Foundation, prior to me being on board, so in the last year and a half, redid their strategic plan, and one of the spokes now is primary care. So we have 2 family physicians who are opening a new practice that have signed into the program. The program is actually a one-time forgivable loan of up to $30,000 if you sign a contract to be within our community area. It's to help new doctors relocate here and set up their practices. We also have a program which will now allow family practice doctors to apply to the foundation to fund their equipment. So you have to imagine that's autoclaves, blood pressure cuffs. I've got doctors who have lasers, ultrasounds in their offices. For all those types of equipment, they can now, rather than their practice having to pay for it, they can actually apply to the Hospital Foundation to get funding for that. This program doesn't exist anywhere else, so it's unique in Nanaimo. I have a feeling, though, that you're going to see other foundations in BC go, hey, that's a brilliant idea. We're all competing for family practice doctors. What we went back to the division with last week from the Hospital Foundation was, we know we have, I think it's now 36,000 patients that are unattached. If we were trying to find the sweet spot for family practice size, they seem to be between 7 and 9 family physicians. And the idea is to create partnerships like we've done with the MOU at the South End Community Center. And what does the size of that space look like? How many doctors, how many staff do we need to employ for that? And then how many attachments do we get from each of those pieces? And we're going to actually partner that with some of the stuff we're hopefully going to do with the Prosperity Corporation. And the reason for that is we're going to set a timeline for which we can believe we can address 50% of the current unattached patients. So that is, for us, that's pretty exciting because we know it'll be more than 50%, because if we create the infrastructure and the number of doctors to address 50%, that will free up what's going on in some of the other clinics. So we're working on a document around that we will be able to share with everybody. One thing that the family division shared with us and that we're going to help them with is critical partnerships when they bring new doctors to town. So for instance, Hello Ferries is actually going to be providing some passes when we bring doctors to town to promote access. We've got a new family practice doc coming to look at Nanaimo. They had originally signed up in Comox, and I'm feeling they need to rethink. They have teenage kids who want access to, you know, even if it's going to university over there, I'm sorry, Richard, but maybe they're going to school over there, or they want access to sporting events over there. We're reaching out to our community partners like Hello Ferries to say, would you provide passes to the doctors the day they come to show how easy it is to get back and forth to Vancouver Island? There were some other pieces around that they were looking for. They're putting together a comprehensive list. They're coming back to our group, and then we'll be going out to our community partners to say, hey, when we're showing off Nanaimo, how can we connect you? And that includes actually a connection with YPN for some spouses, which is a big conversation on the other side. So we're excited about that. I think the other thing that probably wasn't confidential because it came up at the meeting is that, and I think Councillor Hemmons probably knows about this, the family practice, by the end of this year, the division is opening a new sub-clinic inside of the emergency room. And what that is for is unattached patients that are actually in the hospital system. That will probably lead into, we expect in 2025 for the new primary care facility on Norwell. I don't know if we all know that the Island Health is, and I've actually heard this from Capital Planning and had a conversation with them about this as well. UPC, is that what we're calling them? Yeah, UPC is going to be opening there. So we don't know if the new, what's happening in emergency room will be something until that can open in 2025, or if it'll end up being something permanent. The biggest issue for them is staffing it, is what it comes down to, because it means doctors putting in more time. But it would surprise you right now how many patients are in the hospital right now, and not only not attached to a family practice doctor. So what happens to them when they leave the hospital? Nothing. Like there's no attachment. It would also surprise you how many patients in the hospital right now are unattached to a doctor within the hospital because of overcapacity. These are big global issues that we're trying to deal with. But some of these pieces that I've spoken about today, I think are all huge steps forward. And I said at the meeting with Dr. Whitelaw, I think the reason we're getting some traction and success is because all of the group people in the healthcare ecosystem, of which now the family division is listed there as well, we're all talking and communicating and actually all working forward together. So lots of exciting things happening, and keep your ears peeled because I'll be asking for more help.
You're like a Christmas present, probably. Thank you.
So just some comments if I can. So when it comes to your advocacy and anything that you need from the university, happy to have the dean talk, happy to have you interview nursing students, instructors, all of that, the impact and the importance of this project. So willing to absolutely support that offer. We are working with the university and in partnership with Barney. We're working at setting up a lunch with Kathy McNeil, the president of VIHA, and Dr. Saucier to discuss this concept of potentially looking at med school seats at VIU. So a couple things from that perspective that we want to reach out. What I found interesting was Dr. Copeland shared with me that the size of RGH and not having a med school associated with it is beside him, that the amount of patients that is supported there, and there's no current school associated with it. And Dr. Saucier does know the new president of UBC, so hopefully being able to leverage some opportunities there. So that's and then from a childcare perspective, VIU is also we've started construction on our Center of Reconciliation Excellence, which is 75 licensed spots for children. 50% are Indigenous, 50% are non-Indigenous. But again, we do the same thing. I mean, from a preference is given to students because that's one of the needs that they have. However, if we look at how we can leverage the working with the nurses who require, and even if we go down that road of a med school, there's spots there that we could probably look at as well. So
sorry, and I was remiss at saying VIU is definitely a partner in the healthcare ecosystem, and we've had joint meetings. I had the privilege of having lunch with Deb actually not that long ago, and talking about this further. The medical school is a critical component of NRGH being a teaching hospital, and part of I asked the question about the housing piece and what short-term means, because the same thing, because we do have residents who come here, some of them only for 2 years, we have locums who come here for 3 months, and how do we house those people? How do we educate them is a big piece. I think we're looking for 25 seats in medical school. The cancer tech program would be a huge win for Nanaimo because that would bring the isotope program here. If you understand what's going on with all of that piece, and us not bringing the isotopes from Vancouver to us, which limit how many radiation treatments we can give, that's something definitely could come through VIU. And I see VIU being a critical partner in how the hospital moves forward. And those conversations have all been happening as well, so yeah.
Very good.
Just a quick question, Don, to your point about the province not being prepared to deal with the tower if we're going to have the expanded extended care thing. Will the MNP data provide sufficient background to kind of refute that? Are they doing like patient population?
So I haven't, since the latest announcement, I haven't actually read the updates to the report, so I'll have to see that. But to be quite honest, it's felt within our group that while that is obviously a positive that we're getting those beds, it will in no way alleviate the strain on the busiest emergency room and a hospital that operates, grossly over capacity every single day by 20%. And with the staffing at, well, we were at 85%. I heard in my last meeting that we've had for every single staff that we're losing at the hospital, we're hiring, our policy is to hire 2. And so I think we're at 93% now, which is pretty exciting. But that won't change that we still need the 600 beds. And so I'm hoping that what I see from MMP's changes from our last meeting, that's included, but I haven't, like I said, I just got it late last night, it got sent to me, so.
Thank you very much, and the timing is pretty good. The next is a verbal update for East South End Community Center, and
Worship is
part of
starting
the
to
say
point.
is Richard's coming to us by all that technology that I can't offer.
We should apologize in advance because Richard's probably taken Ugly Sweater Day one step too far.
Oh, you've already seen it?
We get to comment on that?
The incredible support.
I'm just basing it on past experience. I haven't actually seen it.
Mr. Harding, we welcome you when we can see you. Oh, looks more like looks more like the CAO casual dress. So much for Christmas.
Well, I'm coming, can you hear me okay? I'm coming to you from rainy Powell River, so
Oh, very good.
I can't wear a tie or suit over here or I get chased back on the ferry, so I gotta wear this. Thank you, Worship. Thank you, the committee. Just wanted to give you a quick update on where we're at with South End Community Center. I think when I presented in the summer, we'd done some, come up with some general concepts, working with a lot of the user groups. And I can show you some of that if you need a reminder of where we're at with some of the space ideas. We're still, playing around the idea of about a 60,000 square foot building. The one we've been working on for particularly, well, a few things, but I'll tell you the biggest one, and that's finding the location. So we do have a memorandum of understanding right now with a potential purchaser, and with that purchase or to buy some land. And with that group, they wanted to see some more about what the building would look like on their property and such. So we've been working with them. That's come to, it's moving along quite well. Like we're actually quite pleased that we actually had a memorandum of understanding with them to work with this. I won't say the location yet, but it's a location that we think's really positive if we can secure it. We have a meeting with them next week, actually, because our architects have been able to come up with some massing and show what this building could look like on there. So we hope to come back to council with that group of back to council early in the new year with positive aspects of securing the site. And what we've also been doing this fall is working with a number of other potential groups and organizations. So one we spent more time with this fall is with cultural groups, particularly the Port Theatre, Art Gallery, Museum, and some others, of how the center could also potentially fulfill some of the cultural void that we do have in the community, be it some small practice area or small performance, potentially looking at the concept of, we know we want the 2 gymnasiums, but maybe one of them, the gymnasiums, is more of a black box where it could be, more flexible space for cultural groups as well as other community activities. And then also mentioned that we do have a memorandum of understanding right now with the family practitioners, and that again is just looking at that idea of how do we integrate health and wellness within the building. So particularly the prime council's direction is to work with anything new that we have that has some primary healthcare provisions within it. So still working on that concept with different, be it VHA, the family practitioners, or other groups with it. So again, I can show you some, if you need the reminder of kind of the space that we're thinking of, I can throw that up on the screen here. But we are making some progress, particularly on the site selection. So quite excited.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Questions?
Sorry, I got 2 questions. How much space for primary care? Square footage?
So I think that's one that we're probably we'll be most flexible on, is one of the groups that we really are hoping to be in there is the Vancouver Island Regional Library, but I think given some of their constraints and issues, the chances of having a larger space, we had 5,000 square feet allocated to Vancouver Island Regional Library and about 1,600 for health. I think that would probably flip around where we could be. Yeah. So I think there's opportunities to be really, really creative in that, how that looks like.
Okay, 'cause I know that Highland Health Capital Planning, I was at a meeting with them and they know about the discussion with the family division and would like to add, they would like the model to include some other additional programs, which would mean 1,600 square feet will not be enough space.
Yeah, no, we knew that going in. We're just gonna throw some stuff in because we weren't getting a lot of, to be honest, we tried to get a lot of input during the process, but it was really hard. It's like pulling teeth. And now we're getting a lot more input, I think, at this time and interest. And think there's realizing, well, maybe this could actually happen.
Okay.
So I think in doing so, that opportunities, and so we have a number of partners, and we knew that it would fluctuate as we move along. Getting to the building stage of who's going to be the partners and who and when they're actually included.
That's great. Okay.
So, and for example, we still have our MOU with the school board, and they're still there if this other site doesn't work out. So we'd still be working with them if that's.
So my other question is probably more controversial. Is this gonna have to go to referendum?
I'll let his worship answer that one.
Well, I'm gonna defer to Mr. Lindsay.
Well, I think simply, I'm
Yes.
sorry, your worship, is we would expect for this project this scale, absolutely we have to go to long-term borrowing.
Yeah.
Long-term borrowing means automatically means you need to get the approval of the electorate. Then it's council's decision about how do you get that approval. Do you go to referendum or do you do it through AAP? Traditionally, I would say communities for a project like this would go to referendum. However, it was just in the interior, I think it was Kelowna just borrowed 250 million to do a variety of projects, including recreation projects that went through AAP.
Yeah.
So it's a.
I think it was all recreation projects.
Yeah, so it'll be a decision of the council.
Because I've heard about maybe grouping it for a referendum, but I guess I just want to say it at this table. What worries me about a referendum is we're really bad at them, and as the community, we're really, I guess, good at voting no. And so when I talk about this project, when I sit at when I go to the family division table, or I'm at the hospital foundation board, or we're at the Yes Committee, or we're at any of these various groups, if we're going to a referendum, like I have already said to the groups that I'm involved in, we're going to have to create a groundswell because there is zero reason for anybody north of whatever line you draw to vote yes for this project, right? And so, but by what I gave you is I intentionally, knowing this was next on the agenda, I intentionally in the healthcare update talked about we need 7 to 9 doctors to create this care, and we believe, we're trying to create this information piece about how many unattached patients we can address. So I'm already talking to our medical ecosystem guys saying, look, but if we have to run a referendum, we need to be in the public saying, we think we can take X amount of new patients there, and we can resolve this, because I don't want people to see this as something that's like, oh, hey, that's for everybody who lives in the South End, we're just gonna vote no, I can't get there, it's not in my neighborhood, why would I vote for that? We're gonna vote for that because maybe it'll get you a family doctor. And so that's my worry about the referendum, is we're typically such a no-centric kind of place. I don't know, what else to say about it, but I think we need to focus on the other things that are going to be there, because this type of project offers immense opportunities that if we voted it down, it will be detrimental to our community as a whole.
If I can respond to the initial question, referendum without question in a sense. Otherwise, to build this kind of project, you have to have a dramatic tax increase year after year for a few years, because you're trying to pay it all off within a very short period of time instead of amortizing it, and that's just the way it is. In terms of the community, I appreciate the comments about the negative reaction to things. One of the things I would say to anybody who would oppose this project is, look, there are people from the South End now who are going to Oliver Woods. How many? I can't tell you, but there are definitely people who use facilities all over this community. And by creating any extra capacity, you are in fact enabling the existing facilities, if they're being used by folks, to free up space, because those folks will now be in the new facility, which is closer to where they live, reducing traffic, et cetera, et cetera. So it's in the interest of everyone to do it. And we've certainly heard it from the Division of Family Practice that one of the things the city can do is make this place a more attractive place to live. Quite simply, that's so that people will come here, and so that physicians will bring their spouses and or their children or themselves, whatever the case may be, and they'll want to move to Nanaimo. So it's all important. I think it's fair to say, though, that through the recent AAP process and the negativity of some commentary, particularly in social media, the city will be more attuned to perhaps not being, I won't say optimistic, but being somewhat pessimistic about how the community might react. So we will have, I would hope, a more robust selling job. And I'm not fond of quote-unquote propaganda telling the public what's good for them with their own money, but that is a reality that I think we have to look at this time in a much more effective way. Appreciating that people are feeling pressured and stressed, and every time we go to the grocery store, they're reminded every day, every week, that it's getting harder and harder for them to exist. And if they're coming to town trying to find a place to live, the rents are extraordinary compared to where they were. So I think council is very much attuned to that, because and to come back to the AAP process for Public Works, we saw that as a pretty basic project. That's like voting to put a new roof on a house when the roof is leaking. It seemed to be a pretty straightforward proposition, and I don't think we appreciated the response that came. So we've learned a lesson.
I think, if I could, Your Worship, I mean, Bill and I have talked about this. A part of the mindset issue that exists here is that people think Nanaimo's a small town. As somebody came to me yesterday and said, Nanaimo's a big city. I said, yep. And it's about time we started acting like it, right? Our infrastructure isn't where, and I agree with you, the public works piece was in our infrastructure. It didn't, not in the top 5, but it was definitely in our infrastructure report. And you kind of need that to start doing the major infrastructure that a big city is going to require. And so I guess my comments about the referendum is knowing sooner rather than later how that's going to proceed is important, because I think us sitting at this table and the organizations that we all belong to as community members have to start playing a role in some of these conversations, right? We rely on the city to announce that there's going to be a referendum, and then they do all of their due diligence and they do all of their work, and then various factions all stand up and say, what's going on. But quite often the people that are the base and that are the people in favor of moving forward, we just think we all know, right? And it's kind of like raising kids. My husband would often say, well, of course our children know that. I said, well, did we say that to them? We have to say it to them. And I think particularly on this project, it's going to take a community of us to make that project happen. Because there will be, I personally feel, just seeing the comments that came up about the public works, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we can't afford to vote that project down. And partially why I'm excited about that project is because I think it's an example for future projects moving forward. I can tell you from the division side, we want to see other projects where that same model, where that becomes the first project of its type, and it becomes the model, and we create that successful project for other places in our community. So that's my worry about the referendum and why I brought it up.
Noted and heard, believe me. Thank you. We are just a couple minutes shy of 11 o'clock. Jessica?
I was hoping to just get clarification on that motion that was made earlier and make sure that I've captured the intent correctly. So if I can read it back to you now. At the moment, I've got that the mayor's leadership table recommend that council direct staff to prepare a report with options and costs for expanding the city's fiber network based on the city fiber strategy presentation made at today's meeting. So it wasn't exactly clear on the slide, so I want to make sure that that was what the expectation was.
Work for you, Mr. Lindsay? Works for me. Good? Yes, excellent, thank you. Thank you so very much to everyone this morning from David.
30 seconds. We're meeting next, I see, in March. So I'm full on homeless analysis research. 40 pages and 100 citations. Like I'm full on this, 40 hours plus. I think it just needs to be done. So I've looked at it from a really broad, holistic perspective. I'm just letting this table know that governance has invited me in January, I believe. I haven't got the invite yet, but I've been told by a couple of councillors that's the case. So I'm just letting this table know that what you saw 3 months ago was like this much of where I am now. And you saw me with the numbers today, right? So it's, in my view, it's one of the most pressing issues this community faces. And there are solutions, and I'm bringing solutions. I've run the numbers, I know how it can be paid for. So yeah, I'm bringing that, and we'll see where it goes.
Thank you, and I can assure you that based on the volume and nature of the emails and communication I receive and the conversations I have all around this community with everybody, it is number one, no question about it.
And maybe just I can say too, I don't know if you saw in the news bulletin, and I did an op-ed on this and received some positive feedback. There was one letter to the editor that said it was a lot simpler than that, just haul them off the street and lock them away. I thought, no, that's not quite what we wanted.
Well, Dave, I can say from the hospital campus perspective, where we are seeing a marked increase in homelessness from last year to this year, and where last Friday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, I was accosted in my own office by a homeless person and had to call for help.
Wow.
I want to know what your answers are like right now. So.
Thank you, Jessica.
Sorry to interrupt again, but I believe our schedule for upcoming topics for the Governance and Priorities Committee has been adjusted slightly, and that presentation is scheduled for February 12th at the moment, rather than January.
I'm sorry.
February 12th.
It's been moved to February 12th.
Oh, February 12th, I'm on? Okay,
That,
all right.
that may reflect the fact the mayor's away on holiday.
No, that's fine. It's just more time.
I just made no request, I must. Look, I just want to say thank you again to staff for organizing refreshments, organizing the meeting, all the presenters of this morning. And thank you to all of you who continue to do this work. Very productive day and a wonderful way to finish the year, so thank you very much. And Merry Christmas to all of you and those you love. And I drive people crazy when I say this, it is Tiny Tim Reserve. God bless us, everyone. Motion for adjournment. Moved Donna, seconded Richard. All those in favor? Many thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Happy holidays to all.